Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're journeying back to the 19th century, to a sun-scorched city on the banks of the Nile, to witness one of history's most defiant and tragic last stands. This is the story of General Charles Gordon and the Siege of Khartoum. So, who was this man, Charles Chinese Gordon? He wasn't your typical Victorian general. He was a deeply religious, eccentric, and fiercely independent military genius. He'd already made a name for himself in China, hence the nickname, suppressing the Taiping Rebellion with an almost mystical reputation for success. He was a hero of the British Empire, a man believed to be touched by destiny, someone who could achieve the impossible. By the 1880s, the political landscape in Sudan was a powder keg. A charismatic religious leader named Muhammad Ahmad had declared himself the Mahdi, the Guided One, prophesied to restore the purity of Islam. He united disparate Sudanese tribes under his banner, launching a holy war, or jihad, against the Egyptian Ottoman rulers, who were propped up by the British. His forces, known as the Mahdists or Ansar, were sweeping through Sudan, and one by one, Egyptian garrisons were falling. The situation was dire. The British government, led by Prime Minister William Gladstone, wanted out. They had no appetite for a full-blown war in Sudan. Their policy was one of evacuation. They needed to pull all Egyptian soldiers, administrators, and European civilians out of the country before the Mahdi's forces overran everything. But this was a monumental task. Who could possibly manage such a perilous retreat from the heart of a hostile territory? They needed a hero. They needed a man with an iron will and a legendary reputation. They chose Charles Gordon. His mission, as London saw it, was simple: go to Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, assess the situation, and organize the evacuation. Just get the people out. Gordon, however, saw his mission through a different lens. He wasn't just an administrator. He was a Christian soldier, a governor with a deep sense of duty to the people he had once governed. He saw the Mahdi not just as a political threat, but as a force of chaos and darkness. When Gordon arrived in Khartoum in February 1884, he was greeted as a savior. The people cheered, believing he had come not to retreat, but to save them. This reception profoundly affected him. Instead of immediately planning the evacuation, he began to fortify the city. He laid mines, dug trenches, and organized the defenses. He sent impassioned telegrams back to London, pleading for reinforcements, for a show of British force. He argued that simply abandoning Khartoum would be a stain on the empire's honor and a death sentence for its inhabitants. But London was deaf to his pleas. Gladstone was adamant. No British troops would be sent. Gordon was on his own. He had disobeyed his orders. What started as an evacuation mission had transformed into a siege. In March 1884, the Mahdi's forces completed their encirclement of Khartoum. The telegraph lines were cut. The city was isolated from the outside world, a tiny island of Egyptian and European presence in a vast, modest sea. For the next 10 months, Gordon orchestrated a masterful defense. With only a few thousand poorly equipped Egyptian soldiers against a fanatical army of over 50,000 Mahdists, he used every ounce of his ingenuity. He commandeered river steamers, armoring them to create a small, makeshift navy that could patrol the Nile, harassing the enemy and foraging for food. He printed his own currency to keep the city's economy from collapsing. His presence alone was a source of morale. He would stand on the palace roof, telescope in hand, calmly observing the enemy, projecting an aura of unshakable confidence. Inside the city, however, conditions were deteriorating. Food supplies dwindled. Starvation and disease became rampant. The people of Khartoum, who had once hailed Gordon as a messiah, grew desperate. The constant bombardment, the hunger, the sense of hopelessness. It was a city living on borrowed time. Gordon's own letters, smuggled out by brave messengers, reveal a man wrestling with his fate, firm in his resolve but aware of the coming doom. He famously wrote, "I am determined to await the coming of the English troops, and if they do not arrive, I shall be proud to die at my post." Meanwhile, back in Britain, public opinion was shifting dramatically. Gordon's plight had captured the nation's imagination. The press portrayed him as a Christian hero, abandoned by his own government. Queen Victoria herself pressured Gladstone to act. Reluctantly, the government finally authorized a relief expedition. But it was a classic case of too little, too late. The relief column, led by Sir Garnet Wolseley, faced an arduous journey up the Nile and across the desert. It was a logistical nightmare, slowed by the harsh terrain and enemy resistance. They were racing against time, but time was a luxury Khartoum no longer had. As 1885 began, the end was near. The Nile's water level dropped, making parts of Khartoum's defenses vulnerable. A traitor within the city walls reportedly showed the Mahdists a weak point in the fortifications. In the pre-dawn hours of January 26, 1885, the Mahdi ordered the final assault. Tens of thousands of his warriors stormed the weakened defenses. The exhausted and starving Egyptian soldiers were quickly overwhelmed. The city fell into a storm of violence and chaos. And what of Gordon? Accounts of his final moments are varied, becoming the stuff of legend. The most enduring image, immortalized in a famous painting, is of Gordon standing at the top of the stairs of the governor's palace. Armed only with a pistol and his ceremonial sword, he faces the onrushing Mahdist warriors with calm defiance, refusing to surrender, meeting his end as the soldier he had always been. Whether it happened exactly like this is debated, but it captures the spirit of his last stand perfectly. Just 2 days later, on January 28th, the advanced steamers of the British relief column came within sight of Khartoum. They saw a city shrouded in smoke. They saw the Mahdi's flags flying over the palace. They were too late. Gordon was dead. The city had fallen. The mission was a catastrophic failure. The news of Gordon's death sent shockwaves through Britain. It was a national trauma. The public mourned a fallen hero, and their grief quickly turned to anger, directed squarely at Prime Minister Gladstone. He was labeled the murderer of Gordon, and his government soon fell. Gordon was martyred, becoming a symbol of imperial sacrifice and heroism, a legacy that would echo for decades. The Mahdi would establish his state, but he himself would die only a few months after his greatest victory. It would take another decade for the British, under Lord Kitchener, to return and reconquer the Sudan at the Battle of Omdurman, an event driven largely by the desire to avenge Gordon. So, was Gordon a disobedient subordinate who brought disaster upon himself, or a tragic hero who stayed true to his convictions until the very end? The answer probably lies somewhere in between. His story is a powerful reminder of the complex interplay between individual character, political calculation, and the tides of history. His last stand in Khartoum remains one of the most compelling and dramatic episodes of the Victorian era. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. What are your thoughts on General Gordon? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. We'll see you in the next one.